This is the time where people of goodwill, whomever they are, need to stand up. And many of them are, but they're not standing up in our colleges and universities. The administrators are not, because the administrators have created this. They've created the tenure situation, they've created the faculty situation, they've created the admissions situation, and now these schools are filled with anti-American, anti-Israel, Constitution, Declaration of Independence hating reprobates. The House Education Committee, which is run by the Republicans, barely, given the very slight majority in the House, did a fantastic job the other day in holding hearings and having 3 presidents of top poison Ivy League schools. And by the way, I noticed that phrase is being picked up on Fox now, Mr. Producer. One of them had a graphic, poison ivy. So I want to thank them for listening. Anyway, and you want to know why these colleges and universities are filled with Marxists and Islamists, tenured professors who hate America? They won't even condemn these presidents, what's taking place. They'll say, well, I personally feel this. We're not interested in your personal feelings. Obviously, we don't give a damn about you personally. But you run these massive institutions, multi-billion dollars, that receive billions of dollars in federal monies directly and indirectly. And I think this is demonstrating the fifth column in this country. The fifth column being our universities, our media, and the teachers' unions. Oh, and of course, the Democrat Party. So let's take a look at how PBS NewsHour handled this the other day. Go.
We're going to shift our focus now to the heated debate on many college campuses over the Israel-Hamas war.
No, the heated debate on our college campuses, there is no debate. You have Jewish students who are under attack. Jewish students who are hiding on college campuses. Jewish students who are locking themselves in their dorm rooms or in the libraries. Jewish students who have to take their yarmulkes off, or their Star of David, or anything that identifies them as Jewish. That's not a heated debate over the war between Israel and Hamas. That is flat out Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, born of decades of Democrat Party rule over these colleges and universities, decades of incestuous faculty decisions about other faculty that they're going to hire from the same universities, the same mentality, decades of a complete lack of oversight by our state legislatures and Congress that spend hundreds of billions of dollars funding these institutions, which are completely out of control. I used to say these are the last vestiges of Stalinism, but they're also the last vestiges of Hitlerism. And the Hamas funding network in this country, which is very robust, has been taking advantage of this. The Communist Chinese Party, with the Confucius Institutes, has been taking advantage of this. Other terror organizations through front groups, phony charitable organizations, have been taking advantage of this. And of course, George Soros is funding all kinds of anti-American, anti-Israel front groups as well, and they're out there in the streets defending all this. That's what's taking place. Our colleges and universities, I'd say 98% of them, have lost their original purpose. They are snake pits, they are rat nests, they are anti-American, they are poisonous. Like everything else the Democrat Party, the Marxists, and the Islamists touch, they destroy them. And I want to remind you, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, every one of these anti-Semites, every one of these racists and bigots, every one of these Marxists and Islamists who are able to vote for Democrats. This is part of the base of the Democrat Party, which is why you do not see a fulsome attack on this by the Biden administration as Attorney General, the head of the Civil Rights Division at Justice, the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Education, the Department of Homeland Security. You do not see press conferences, you do not see press releases, you do not see an urgency. And then, of course, they try and create confusion and fog when they compare anti-Semitism in this country to Islamophobia. Let me say this for the 1,000th time. There is no systemic Islamophobia in America. Where is it? Don't listen to this group, CARE, which claims to be the largest Muslim civil rights group in America. It's the largest Muslim front group for Hamas in America. It was founded in the 1990s in the Marriott Hotel right next to the Philadelphia airport. It was created for the purpose of doing exactly what's going on in our country today. Now, how do we know this? Because back then, the FBI actually did what it was supposed to do. It wiretapped the conference room in which there was a meeting with top Hamas terrorists and others who were already in this country, and what they needed to do to influence American public opinion, American decision makers, and the American media, and they have succeeded at least 2 out of 3 decision makers in the media. A whole educational campaign, a whole propaganda campaign, a whole media campaign, and CARE is part of that. CARE is an unindicted co-conspirator in the so-called Holy Land Foundation litigation, where the government brought a case against the Holy Land Foundation for laundering money through these front groups into terrorist operations. Believe that? CARE is still talked about as the largest Muslim civil rights organization. CARE has spent the last 30 years freely working its will politically and through the media. CARE has been at the front table with the Democrat Party, the Democrat National Convention, has had access to presidents, Democrat presidents in the White House. Think about this, a Hamas front group. There you have it. So this isn't, as this man says, between the Israeli and Hamas war that's going on here. That's just an excuse. The anti-Semites are like cockroaches. They see their opportunity and they go for it. Go.
And concerns over incidents of violence, threats, and hate speech, which made their way to Capitol Hill today. Protests that erupted after the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel have roiled college campuses across the country, with college administrators facing backlash over their responses to alleged incidents of anti-Semitism.
Alleged incidents of anti-Semitism. Buried by the times. Beyond belief. Abandonment of the Jews, written by a professor who's not Jewish, who's since passed, a great man, David Wyman. The media. They're doing it again like the 1930s. The Third Reich in the Ivory Tower, Complicity and Conflict on American Campuses, Professor Stephen Norwood. How the Nazi Germans, the Third Reich, literally had influence in our colleges and universities, as well as our media, but our colleges and universities actually paid for the influence, just as the Islamists and the Communist Chinese do today. The Germans did too. They also used our immigration system to insert so-called students into our colleges and universities, just as happens today from the Middle East with our open borders, our student visas, and so forth. So you have in the United States today, and here's another one, Hitler's American Friends. And I've read part of this to you before, but here the Third Reich in the Ivory Tower, just to show you, legitimating Nazism, Harvard University and the Hitler regime, Harvard again. It's amazing how Harvard was the hotbed, among other universities, of anti-Semitism during World War II. And the New York Times was covering up the Holocaust during World War II. These are the 2 great American institutions, right? Harvard, the New York Times. Complicity and Conflict, Columbia University's response to fascism. The Seven Sisters Colleges in the Third Reich promoting fellowship through student exchange. A respectful hearing for Nazi Germany's apologists, the University of Virginia Institute of Public Affairs. Nazi nests, German departments in American universities. And it goes on. Do you realize I'm the only person in radio and television, whether a host or a guest, who's read these books? This is our history. 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 More specifically, it's the history of American universities and the American media at the height of World War II, at the height of the Holocaust, and it is an ugly history at these universities and the media. And that's why the media will not talk about itself, and that's why these university presidents will not talk about themselves. Victor Davis Hanson wrote a piece in American Greatness the other day talking about it's starting to feel like the 1930s, something we've talked about here, I talk about on radio and Fox. Oh, it's definitely starting to feel like the 1930s. You now have Palestinian organizations that, like in Philadelphia, 30, 40, 50 showed up to protest a restaurant that was owned by a Jew. You have this going on all over the country. You have synagogues being defaced, and you have no urgency at the Department of Justice. You have no urgency among the Democrat Party. Big deal. Schumer gave a speech, and that's all he gave, and it was a very pathetic speech. Joe Biden says almost nothing, and when he does, he brings up Islamophobia. This has nothing to do with Islamophobia. As I've said over and over again, Islamophobia is in the Middle East where Muslims are slaughtering Muslims. That doesn't happen in this country. You don't see Muslims running for their lives. You don't see Muslims locking themselves in dorm rooms. You don't see Muslims locking themselves in libraries. You don't see Muslims hiding who they are in our schools and in the streets and so forth and so on. No, that's reserved for Jews. You can even look in Brooklyn, where you have Orthodox Jews who wear certain clothing, wear their hair a certain way, wear certain hats. They're targets. There's a reason why hate crimes, over 50% of hate crimes in America are against Jews. You'll notice the more the borders are open, the more we import individuals from these cultures and these societies that have no respect for other people. You'll notice the hate crimes for Jews go up. Well, who's doing it? Isn't it funny they don't keep the statistics? Is it the Irish? No. The Italians? No. The Germans? No. Well, who's doing all this? Well, who do you think? Just look in the streets. Just look at our college campuses and so forth. Go.
That was the focus of the congressional hearing today, as the presidents of Harvard University, the University of Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts Institute of Technology faced questions from the House Committee on Education and the Workforce. Committee Chairwoman Virginia Fox opened the hearing, accusing the schools of fostering a culture of anti-Semitism.
Now, isn't this funny? First of all, this has been going on, this report, for about a minute and a half, and the guy doesn't shut up. He just tells us what we're going to hear. So it's alleged incidents of anti-Semitism, and then there's accusations from the Republican chairman against the universities. You see how it works? Public broadcasting system. Why do we have a public broadcasting system? Because the government wants to make 100% sure that the left-wing mantra narrative is projected into the nation, even though they own the commercial media as well. And PBS does this, whether it's a Republican president or a Democrat president, it pushes the Democrat Party radical agenda 24/7. Go.
Institutional anti-Semitism and hate are among the poison fruits of your institution's cultures.
Harvard President Claudine Gay, who assumed the role this summer, acknowledged her own struggles at such a tense moment.
I know many in our Harvard Jewish community are hurting and experiencing grief, fear, and trauma. I have heard from faculty, students, staff, and alumni of incidents of intimidation and harassment. At the same time, I know members of Harvard's Muslim and Arab communities are also hurting.
Say. This is how you water down what's going on these campuses. You create a false moral equivalency. Muslims aren't threatened, aren't victimized at Harvard or any of the poison Ivy League schools. Period. That's not what's going on in this country. That would be like in the late 1930s, talking about the rise in anti-Semitism, and then say, but we also have Aryan phobia. Excuse me? Oh yeah, Aryan phobia. I mean, some Germans, aka Aryans, as they would call themselves in the Hitler regime, are being discriminated against. You get the point? The point is that this is being done intentionally to water down, to create a smokescreen. So this will never be resolved by these presidents of these universities or a Democrat administration or a Democrat attorney general or Democrats in Congress. Never. This is a hearing that's called by Republicans. Over in the Senate, they haven't had a hearing yet. And yet the Democrat leader, the leader of the Senate who can determine what the schedule is, who has hearings on what, he's Jewish. But he's also a radical, partisan Democrat. And so it's one thing to go to the floor of the Senate, Schumer, and say, you know, our fellow travelers, which is a communist term, by the way. Yeah, it's okay. Our fellow travelers in the progressive movement, they're kind of turning on us, and it's very upset. Okay, that's a 10-minute speech. You're being praised. How about a hearing? You're a legislative body. How about looking into these colleges and universities? How about questioning the Attorney General of the United States, the head of the Civil Rights Division at DOJ and the Education Department? How about doing something about this with oversight hearings? There's no urgency. In fact, there's nothing. Nothing. And when you have over 100 members of the Democrats in the House, half of them voting against a resolution basically condemning anti-Semitism, what does that tell you? It tells you a lot. Go ahead.
During these difficult days, I have felt the bonds of our community strain. In response, I have sought to confront hate while preserving free expression. This is difficult work.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you see this PBS, how they handle it? She came under intense questioning. I watched this. And she made a fool out of herself, turned herself into a pretzel. Personally, I'm opposed and I condemn the references to the destruction of the Jewish state and the Jewish people, but there's free speech. And she was asked direct questions, and she wiggled and she squirmed. And yet, what does PBS do? They run with her opening statement. And her opening statement is pablum. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. We've got anti-Semitism, we have Islamophobia. The fabric of Harvard is being stretched into... Really? This is the time where people of goodwill, whomever they are, need to stand up. And many of them are. But they're not standing up in our colleges and universities. The administrators are not, because the administrators have created this. They've created the tenure situation, they've created the faculty situation, they've created the admissions situation, and now these schools are filled with anti-American, anti-Israel, Constitution, Declaration of Independence hating reprobates who believe what they're told about the 1619 Project, who believe what they're told about critical race theory. That's what's going on in these college campuses. Go ahead.
And I know that I have not always gotten it right.
Sally Kornbluth is the president of MIT.
I have been president of MIT since January of this year. As an American, as a Jew, and as a human being, I abhor anti-Semitism.
The question isn't what they abhor. The question is, what are they doing? What are they doing? Nothing effective. They're giving bureaucratic pablum. They're telling you how they feel. They're telling you that they abhor these certain things. If they're even willing to say that, you saw President Gay of Harvard there go on about, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, the Islamophobia and this other stuff going on here. It's just incredible. I've had enough of PBS. They can't even get this straight.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.